The Indonesian government has begun its invasion of rebel-held Central Sumatra. First reports of the invasion were received from Singapore early this morning. It followed the dropping of warning leaflets by Indonesian Air Force planes at the weekend. A communique issued by the government claims the capture of 3 rebel-held towns. Let's take a look at the map to see just where the invasion has been made. The High Court handed down a majority verdict in Melbourne today, ruling that travelling expenses are not an allowable deduction from taxable income. The case was brought before the High Court by 2 Sydney men, a dentist and a ship's joiner. They had appealed against a refusal by the Commissioner of Taxation to allow them to deduct the money they had spent on travel to and from work during the past tax year. The dentist had claimed a deduction of £28 for train fares. The ship's joiner, £62 for bus fares. Sydney's weather began to clear this morning, while householders, business people and the civic authorities were clearing up the damage left by yesterday's torrential rain. During 48 hours of deluge, at least 9 inches of rain were recorded at the Sydney Weather Bureau, and more than 15 inches fell at some seaside suburbs. This is what the rain did to a section of roadway in Bronte. At this point, the road is split in two, with a low-level road and a high-level road 25 feet above. The force of banked-up water carried away a retaining wall from a section of the high-level road, and many tons of rubble and concrete fell with a roar to the road below. In Archer Street, Chatswood, the roots of a large tree were loosened by water, with the result that it ended up across the footpath and part of the road. The wind, tearing at the widespread branches of the tree, slowly pushed it over as the roots lost their hold in the sodden ground. Several people living nearby lent a hand in the job of cutting up the tree, which appeared to be the easiest way of clearing the street. The Polish government has announced the discovery of a common grave containing the bodies of about 20,000 Allied prisoners of war. The grave is in southwest Poland, and an official statement says the bodies are those of British, French, Soviet, Belgian and Yugoslav soldiers and civilians. It is believed they died in a nearby German prisoner of war camp. A monument is to be erected at the mass grave. In the general elections in the Sudan, the pro-Western Umma party and its allied Democratic Party seem well on the way to victory. After the first day's counting, unofficial figures gave the combined parties 78 seats. The pro-Egyptian Unionist Party had 37 seats. Electors turned out on the backs of donkeys and on foot for the first general election held in the 2-year-old nation. This film was taken in the village of Buri, outside Khartoum, near the headwaters of the Nile. Under the watchful eye of the police, voting was orderly. For the benefit of the largely illiterate population, the ballot papers were marked with symbols: a spear for one party, a lion for another. And in Sydney today, the British aircraft industry was discussed by Sir George Edwards, the Managing Director, Aircraft, of Vickers Armstrongs. This afternoon, Sir George was interviewed by an ABC reporter.
What of the future of the British aircraft industry?
I think it's got a good future because it's got such a strong past.
The television industry made further significant progress last year. A survey published in the United States yesterday shows that at the end of 1957, there were 1,100 television stations throughout the world, an increase of 231 stations during the year. Australia's 6 stations went into operation only a few weeks before the start of 1957. By the end of last year, there were about 68 million television sets in use, 5.5 million more than at the end of 1956. More than 2/3 of the sets, 47 million, are in the United States, which has more than half of the world's TV stations. 7 more countries started television last year, making a total of 50. A fully laden semi-trailer crashed into a sedan car at Greenwich today. This was the result, but nobody was hurt. The driver's side of the car was crushed in, and the force of the collision was such that one of the front wheels of the semi-trailer was torn off. The owner of the car is Mr. B. Carrier of Greenwich Road, Greenwich. This is he beside his car soon after the accident. The driver of the semi-trailer can be seen unloading the drums. The drums were transferred to another truck so that the wrecked semi-trailer could be removed. The accident occurred just as Mr. Carrier was driving from his home into the street along this driveway. The distinguished Australian scholar, Lord Lindsay of Burqa, was recently refused admission to enter communist China from Hong Kong. Tonight's newsreel begins with an interview with Lord Lindsay by a Canadian television reporter in Hong Kong.
Why do you think they turned you back in this particular fashion? Well, it's very hard to say. I mean, I think my feeling is that they probably had a certain amount of hesitation about allowing us in to begin with. I believe, Lord Lindsay, that you served with Chinese communist armies for 3 years during the Japanese War. Oh, yes. Well, actually, I had my first contacts with them back in 1938, when I made a vacation trip into the guerrilla areas. Well, that suggests to a lot of us that perhaps you know a little bit too much about the Chinese communists, and that with the change, the hardening in policy and attitude of the regime right now, that quite possibly they are frightened to have you inside their territory. Well, that frankly seems to me is probably the basic reason.
Melbourne's Moomba Festival, and 500,000 people packed the city streets for a procession of fun and gaiety. A brilliant spectacle for onlookers as more than 90 decorated floats and 36 brass bands moved slowly along a 2.5-mile route. The occasion was a Labour Day holiday, and it was the 4th Moomba Festival. Imaginative design and riotous colours were the keynotes of the procession. Now an established favourite, the legendary Bunyip made his annual appearance, grinning happily with the spirit of the day. Melbourne was at its gayest, living up to the translation of Moomba, which means get together and have fun. The clowns set the pace, big clowns and little clowns, and there were trade floats as well to add variety. Those who were lucky managed to get a bird's-eye view of proceedings. For pure animation, a huge slithering Chinese dragon almost stole the show, a spectacular model writhing and twisting down Melbourne's main streets. The parade moved through the city to the banks of the Yarra, where a lively outdoor carnival was staged for the remainder of the day. The city shrugged off its cares, and all was gay on this Moomba Day in Melbourne. Paris, with its famous river in somewhat expansive mood. Footpaths were submerged and riverfront boulevard swamped as the Seine spilled over its banks. At Gournay, the River Marne inundated the main street, transforming it into a minor canal. Traffic has been restricted, and in some areas people are forced to do their shopping by boat. French rivers in turmoil near Paris. It was never like this back home, but these high-stepping occupants of Hamburg Zoo in West Germany are making out quite well just the same. The cameraman wanted to see how the various creatures from tropical zones were standing up to the bitter freeze. Some frolicked about quite happily, reveling in the strange white surroundings, and others, such as the zebras, regarded it in a more contemplative fashion. It was a decided advantage to be thick-skinned in conditions like these. Here's a case where the cameraman's intrusion was resented. But in spite of the wintry snap, the zoo's daily routine was little changed. The snow was there for those who liked it, and those who didn't merely turned their backs. A fickle twist of the seasons in West Germany.
And that's the end of tonight's ABC Television News and Newsreel.